Hello. This video is entitled Materialism and Free Will. Materialism and Free Will. Now, how the philosophy of materialism, which is the ruling philosophy, the overriding philosophy of the world that we live in, how it relates to the idea of free will is a very interesting question. And free will as an idea has the existence of it has always been doubted, even in societies run not on the philosophy of materialism. You know, free will may be limited by the will of God, for example. Or it may be limited by certain universal spiritual laws or principles, karma, you know. So, it's a very interesting subject indeed. Free will. Now, I think it also quite nicely relates to my previous video, Materialism and Responsibility, even though I don't mention the problem of free will in that video. But I think it's pretty obvious that it should be pretty obvious that one can hardly take real responsibility, full responsibility for anything without being able to exercise at least some degree of free will about the subject and in the area, right? Because if you cannot freely decide about, you know, what to do or not to do, how to proceed, so forth, you can hardly be made responsible for anything. And be made responsible is something which we're not really interested in here, because it's enforcement, it's from the outside. But yeah, you cannot, you know, responsibly take responsibility for something. You know, if you can't have any free will in that direction, because a robot cannot be responsible for anything, really responsible for anything, personally responsible. And that is the only responsibility that matters, personal responsibility that you assume willingly, voluntarily. But if you want to hear more about responsibility in materialism, please watch my previous video, Responsibility and Materialism and Responsibility. All right, now in materialism, one is essentially determined by his base instincts and impulses, self-preservation impulse, sexual impulse, so forth, predatory impulse, or I don't know, and the environment. So you might say that one basically is determined, acts under the dictates of his genes and plus the environment, the influence of the environment. And this basic view of man in materialism already in and of itself casts a shadow of doubt on any concept of free will, doesn't it? Because if you are determined by your basic instincts and impulses, which you cannot really control, you can justify them after the fact perhaps, but you cannot consciously control them when they get triggered, and your environment, which obviously is something outer to you, it's not determined by you, then where is the space for free will? Where is the space for free will? Now, let's take us, say a rat in a maze, right? So you might say, at any point of the maze, at any turn of it, the rat has a choice to turn left or right. And so it has to decide whether to take a left turn or a right turn. So it is an exercise of free will on the part of the rat. Well, in a sense it is, but it's a very limited free will. Because the rat is controlled or driven by its self-preservation, its survival impulse, and so it has to go left or right. And yes, it can use the whatever reasoning capacity it has to calculate whether to take a left turn or right turn, but it's a very limited free will. In this sense, you might even say that a computer or calculator has some sort of free will when it perhaps it can use several different procedures to calculate to get to the result of an equation and so forth. But you see, if the rat in this instance had the real unlimited free will, it could decide to lie down there at the crossroad and just not go anywhere, not to turn left or right, but just to lie down there and well, wait till it dies. But it can't. It cannot so decide. Because it acts, and its reason, whatever reasoning capacity it has, is determined by its self-preservation impulse, its survival instinct, right? Okay. Well, surely a free will is not always desirable. I mean, you don't want a murderer to, exercise his free will unhindered, going around and murdering freely whenever he feels to do so. And whoever he wants to murder. But okay, for the purposes of our subject matter in these videos, we would naturally be most interested about the application of free will to ideals and moral choices. Ideals and moral choices. Because ideals is the, it's the thin red line. It's the real sort of what underpins most of what I'm basically trying to say here. So, okay, so the application of free will to ideals and values and choices about right and wrong in materialism. Well, when one decides to act in accordance with a higher ideal, moral precept, what's in it for him? Why should do it? Well, he may feel good about himself, and his self-respect may increase, indeed. But it's all too often at the cost of losing a potential material gain, a material advantage in the broader sense of the word, such as, making money, experiencing more carnal pleasure, gaining more power to control others, and so on. And in materialism, to forego that for the sake of some abstract ideal, abstract right, or abstract good, or, God forbid, sacrifice something. Imagine that. Sacrifice something. Wow. Oh. For an ideal or a moral value. Wow. Even to the extent perhaps of losing one's limb or life. Is in materialism, doing so would be considered sheer madness. Sheer madness. And rightly so. Rightly so. The person must be mad to so decide. In materialism, where the only real purpose of life is to care about oneself and maximize one's, worldly joys. So the person would have to be mad to so decide. And so with the intellectually honest application of materialism, now think about this, really. If you apply the philosophy of materialism honestly and thoroughly, all the heroes, saints, martyrs, and so on must have been mad. Simply mad. Obviously. There is no other explanation, really. And yet, we look up to them and celebrate them, and so on. Well, there you go. There you go. There you see just how consistent the thought of the materialist is. Double think, double speak. Or is it just, I don't know, saying monkey sees, monkey does? I mean, they all celebrate and so must I. Perhaps. I'm not certainly beyond, far from perfection. Well, look, I mean, monkey sees, monkey does need not be in and of itself a bad principle. It helps hold the community together and makes collective action easier. But as everything else, just as everything else, it has two sides to it, and it can be abused. It may be abused, to apparently goad people into mechanically following wrong ideas and working collectively towards bad goals, participating in destructive efforts. The sheeple, as they say these days, those sheeple. They just do everything they hear on television. Sheeple. Damn them. We aren't lost because most people are such sheeple. But you see, an extreme is never a good solution. Well, it rarely is, and it is an extreme to be completely collectivized. To be completely collectivized and only do as others do, no matter what. Like an ant or a bee. But, it is just as extreme, actually, to be completely individualized, always standing aside or against, never contributing to a collective effort. The majority of one or whatever, these crazed libertarians, or I guess it's them who like to use this phrase. If they're not, I apologize. But what is the difference? What is the difference here? If you don't want to go to either extreme, how to act reasonably then? How to act ideally? How to reach an optimum. Well, the difference is ideals. Oddly enough. Yeah, the difference is ideals. If a collective effort aligns with one's ideals, he can join it and contribute. If it doesn't, he would stand aside or oppose it. And as I have stressed in so many of my previous videos, when I talk about ideals as the formative force of a civilization, which enables it to form and grow and holds it together, I'm talking about shared ideals. Shared ideals. Right? But in this particular example, it doesn't mean that the fact that they're shared, that, you know, they could not be interpreted differently by certain people, a group of people at you know, different times, or betrayed or denied and so forth. Yeah. Please take a deeper thought about these statements. So, again, the middle way, the good middle way for the exercise of free will, that is whether to put it in service of a collective effort which aligns with the ideals, or whether to use it to not participate or oppose anything that one sees goes against these ideals. That is the golden middle way, and it is, you know, the optimum guide on how to use one's free will to the degree that one has it or believes can have it. The best way one can. And it also is the only way, only real way, to be useful to a civilization. But as I explained in my previous videos, ideals are impossible in materialism. And this being the case, so is any meaningful explanation or application of the concept of free will. Because really, what is free will? What is the value of free will without ideals? Thanks for watching.